First of all, I just want to say I'm alive.
How do you prove you're not dead? That's the problem facing Benjamin Netanyahu this week.
Let's play Where's Bibi?
The A videos of Benjamin Netanyahu are not stopping.
Yo, I really think he might be actually DED, bruh.
You might have heard the fake rumors that the Israeli Prime Minister had been killed. There were these photos of him, he'd been supposedly killed in an airstrike, and they went all around the world, millions of views.
The thing is, they were generated by AI. But to give you a sense of how far this fake story spread, in the last week, the Israeli Prime Minister has posted multiple videos saying,
Yes, Mike. Yes, I'm alive.
From the BBC, I'm Tristan Redman in London.
and I'm Asma Khalid in Washington, D.C. And welcome to The Global Story on YouTube.
Coming up later, we'll be hearing from Peter Pomerantsev, who's written extensively on the questions of propaganda and disinformation, including the brilliantly titled book, Nothing is True and Everything is Possible.
With a lot of AI, I mean, it's really just a augmentation of what we've seen in social media and what we've seen historically. Before we had AI, people were doing that with rumors. That really is war propaganda 101.
But first, we hear from one of our colleagues who specializes in all of this.
My name's Thomas Copeland and I work for BBC Verify, and I spend my days trying to debunk AI-generated fake footage that's on your social media feed, trying to tell you what's real and what's not real. And that's a job that's becoming harder and harder to do.
Well, just the man we wanted to talk to today.
Yeah, Thomas, we are here to do something which we don't often do on The Global Story, which is to talk about a rumor. Where did we all first hear this rumor that Benjamin Netanyahu was dead?
I can tell you exactly where. I was sitting on my bed at home taking a look at a TikTok that we had put out from BBC Verify earlier on in the day about another AI story. And as sometimes you will do when you're in a TikTok, you'll take a look at the comments. And the comments were all saying, you need to look into the 6 fingers. What about the 6 fingers? Look up the 6 fingers. And I thought to myself, oh gosh, maybe I've been on the tube. I've missed some of the fast moving developments in the online world. And so on my TikTok, I went up to the top corner and searched up 6 fingers. And I saw reams of videos that were making claims that a press conference that Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu had done on the Thursday, these claims said, this is AI. This is an AI version of Netanyahu. How do we know? They said, well, he's got 6 fingers, was the claim in some of the videos. I quickly looked into it. In reality, of course, he didn't have 6 fingers. The HD version of this press conference showed there was an ever so slight shadow on his 5th finger at one moment, one frame within this quite long press conference. But this fell into a long run of false and AI-generated pictures that we had seen since the beginning of the war, claiming to show Benjamin Netanyahu injured or killed, apparently in an Iranian airstrike. And such the volume of these claims that on Sunday of that day, so just a couple of days ago, the Israeli PM decided that he needed to say something for himself. He went to a coffee shop in Jerusalem and filmed a kind of proof of life video in which he said, I am alive, I'm here in this coffee shop, look at my fingers. He held up his fingers. I only have 5 of them. But then what happens, obviously, after that, you look through the comments on that video. We did a TikTok on that video, and people are saying this video is AI generated, and on it goes. And since then, Netanyahu has published more proof of life videos. On Tuesday of this week, conversation, a video showing him standing next to US Ambassador Mike Huckabee walking down a corridor, another proof of life video.
So none of that quieted the naysayers.
None of that quieted the naysayers, and the reason for that is because we have seen this AI-generated wave of content since the beginning of this conflict in particular, and that has left a lot of people, even in the 2 or 3 weeks that this conflict has been going on for, unsure of what they can believe when they look at the pictures and images on their screens in front of them.
Well, you, in fact, Thomas, at Verify, you all did a video to correct the story here. What feedback did you all get?
Well, what we did was we debunked the various AI-generated pictures and images. We debunked this 6-finger claim by showing the HD footage that clearly showed that he didn't have a 6th finger. We showed the proof of life video in the coffee shop. We had multiple angles that were shared on social media by that coffee shop. But of course, the comments then are filled again with folks saying that this is sort of AI generated content. And you're left as a reporter in this slightly difficult position because you're saying to yourself, on one hand, you don't want to chase online conspiracy theories down the rabbit hole, and we want to do a service to our audience. But equally, it's the case that more and more people are believing this content, and it's our job to put in front of people as the next video, maybe on their TikTok timeline, they might see a couple of AI videos, conspiracy theory videos. We want to be the next video that's saying, no, stop for a second, it's not real, and here's how we know it's not real.
Do we know who started the rumor that Netanyahu was killed? Where that idea originated from?
Since the beginning of this conflict, images have circulated online, AI-generated images appearing to show Netanyahu injured after Iranian airstrikes. And they form part of a much wider tapestry of fake content that's focused particularly around Tel Aviv, claiming to show airstrikes in Tel Aviv that never happened. Now, what happens is that a lot of that content is created for the monetization purposes. Then what happens is these false claims are repeated by hardline Iranian news agencies, in the example of Netanyahu's false claims about him being killed or injured. And then the cycle goes round again, and that encourages more folks to make AI-generated footage claiming to show that he has been killed or injured. And so the cycle goes round and round and round. And so if we try to track down exactly where this content first comes from, one of the things at BBC Verify that we spend a huge amount of time doing is this thing called reverse image searching. We take individual pictures or frames from videos, asking search engines, where did this first come from? Sometimes we can have a degree in success of tracking down the account that first posted them. In the case of these videos, it's very, very difficult to do because they have emerged often from multiple and sort of anonymous accounts all at the same time. And so this claim begins to bubble up, bouncing back and forward from those who are trying to make money from it and those who are trying to push a political message from it until it raises the level to the extent that it's reaching your timeline, who might be interested in neither of those two things.
I am curious to understand what's the environment, the ecosystem that led some people to believe this story that, it is not true.
I think that over the last 2 weeks in particular, but it's a little bit longer than that, there has been a fundamental change in the kind of pipeline of content on social media. We have seen over the last 6 months, a little bit longer than that, huge leaps and bounds in the quality of AI-generated picture generators and video generators. And that has allowed for an ecosystem online where folks who are gaming monetization, making money from your clicks, from your likes, from your shares, from your comments, when a war is kicking off in the Middle East, that's clearly a time, and has always been a time, when people are looking to their news sources, they're looking for information, they're going to social media, they're trying to find this information. So you've got a kind of ripe attention economy right there, and you've got folks who are willing to exploit that. And they're using the incentive of monetization programs on many of these social media platforms. X is clearly, a really big and important place for this, but also some of Meta's platforms, TikTok and others. And this process allows them to make money.
Could you break down the economics of how it actually works when if you're an AI content creator and you have an idea, how do you get it out there and how do you monetize it exactly?
Very simply, if you're eligible for monetization programs on one of these different platforms, it might be Facebook, it might be X, you need to maintain consistent levels of engagement in your account, in your content, in order to, remain within that monetization program. And then at home, you have access to AI tools that are increasingly more accessible, they're cheaper. You will sit at home and say to yourself, right, what is going to get lots of engagement online? What else is doing well online? Well, there's a lot of interest in what's happening in the Middle East. There's a lot of interest in airstrike. There's a lot of interest in damage to US bases. I can create some content that is going to build on that interest and take advantage of the fact that people want this information. You can increasingly, and with fewer prompts on these AI generators, request it to create certain content. If you're making lots and lots of it, you might spend less and less time on every individual video when you're just designing to churn out as much stuff as possible, or you might spend a little bit more time to make a higher quality product. Then you can take that and upload it straight onto social media. And you can earn. It's very difficult, and there's not a lot of transparency about the monetization programs on all of these different platforms. But what an expert has told us is that you can earn between $8 to $12 on X for every verified million views or so. And that there are lots of different variables in place there, depending on where you are in the world, etc. But it is the case that $8 to $12 is clearly going to go a lot further in some parts of the world than others. And there have been well-documented reporting at the BBC and others that there are parts of the world where a lot of this content does come from. Some of it's Southeast Asia, some of it's Pakistan and other places like that. Now, we can't tie direct accounts to direct parts of the world in quite as explicit a manner, but that reporting exists as to where lots of this content does come from and where that money will go a long way.
Though, Thomas, can I pause you? Because hasn't Elon Musk just in the last few days come out and made it clear that they are not going to allow AI slop to be monetized?
And this is one of the reasons that we know that this is an unprecedented wave. So this was last week, X's head of product said that in his view, 99% of the AI-generated war videos on X were being made and created and posted by folks that, in his words, were trying to game monetization. And the new policy that X has introduced and said that they would introduce is that anybody that posted this video would be removed from their monetization program for 90 days. And that's a very significant move from X.
Yeah, because they've had a pretty permissive strategy to date, I would say.
Yeah, amongst the other social media platforms, I think critics would definitely come to a conclusion that they are much more permissive in their moderation policies. And so that's a really massive and meaningful step. We also approached TikTok and Meta, the parent company of Instagram and Facebook, asking them if they had plans to do the same. They didn't get back to us. But what we do know is that all of these platforms are currently researching and engaged in ways to work out if they can detect AI and figure out how they're going to moderate it on their platforms.
To be clear, the rumor, the false storyline that Netanyahu was killed, that's not the only image, video storyline we have seen that has gone viral as a result of AI since this war began. Is that right? I mean, can you give us a sense of just the sheer scope of AI slop that we've seen out there?
It's been a massive problem for us over the last number of weeks. Every time over the last number of years a conflict has come up, we've said to ourselves and the team, gosh, this is the AI slop war. This is the AI generated war. And then the next conflict comes along and we say, whoa, there's so much more, and on it goes. And we've reached the point now where for a period of time, certainly, I'm a fairly sophisticated consumer on social media. I would be scrolling through my social media feed and it felt like every other video was AI slop. Every other video was a false claim of an airstrike in Tel Aviv. It was a false claim of an airstrike on a US base in Qatar. Even Donald Trump said in the last number of days that he had been fooled by a video. He said that he called up a general to ask what's going on with the ship, and the general had to tell him, no, it hasn't been hit. So these videos about Netanyahu are 100% within a wider ecosystem of a total wave of content that sometimes feels a little bit like those who are trying to make money from this, just kind of throwing anything at the wall, seeing what works.
Part of your job, you say at Verify, is to verify images, verify videos, figure out what's real, what's being generated by AI. And do you find that more difficult now in this moment? And the reason I'm asking this is there was a photograph published in the New York Times that showed a massive crowd of Iranians out after the new supreme leader was announced. And that image was criticized by some as being generated by AI. And I actually saw the New York Times publicly respond and say, no, this was a genuine image taken by a real journalist in Iran, and that they do not use AI for photographs to generate, and to manipulate images. But that made me wonder, gosh, even real things are now being questioned or criticized as being AI. And it feels like there's a lot of just information and disinformation warfare around what's real and what's not.
100%. And this links back to the sort of Netanyahu proof of life videos, right? It's a real video that's put out there and people start to look at it and say, well, hold on, is it real or is it not fake? I've seen so much stuff that I couldn't work out if it's real or not fake. Is it real or not fake? So I think you have two things here. One, folks who are really sincere and have massively been, I guess, confused, misled, taken advantage of, exploited by those who are trying to make money from this content over the last number of weeks, for example, who just don't know the answer and are questioning everything now, no longer know if they can trust what they see. But then you also get the folks that are trying to exploit that fact and They probably know deep down that that was a real picture that the New York Times published, but it's in their interests to spread uncertainty, to sow uncertainty, and to say, oh, that could be AI. And that's how you sort of denigrate and collapse trust in the stuff that you're seeing in front of you. And clearly that is something that is occasionally, and in some cases we see, is being done for a very specific political purpose.
What are the solutions to stop this deluge of AI content?
A massive question, and if I could answer it, I might not be sitting right here. I think I am really interested to see what the results of X's demonetization approach is going to be, and whether that has a measurable impact in the amount of content on there. Lots of different social media companies are investing more, or certainly talking more about AI detection and moderation. There is kind of a fundamental tension, and this is what experts have told us. There's a fundamental tension between, prioritizing on platforms content that will get lots of engagement, that is relatively cheap to produce, and that will normally come through a sort of AI pipeline, and information that is always accurate and authentic. And that's a difficult tension to resolve, and social media companies over this year in particular are going to be looking really hard at that. I think there are and people in the space would talk about other things like content credentialing, trying to put metadata and labels and watermarks on content so you can prove when they're real and where they're fake. I think ultimately, though, all of this comes down to individuals, and we're just trying, at Verify, we do this all the time, and you can go online and find our transparency videos trying to tell people, here's the different approaches, here's the different tools that you can use to try to spot the real and the fake at home. And the end result of that will be moving away from a space and a mindset where we say everything, we trust what we believe until we're disproven, to maybe saying, well, we're going to be slightly more suspicious until we have good proof that something is real.
Thanks so much, Thomas. It was great to talk with you.
Thanks so much for having me.
My name is Peter Pomerantsev. I'm an author of books about propaganda, most recently How to Win an Information War, and a scholar at the Johns Hopkins University in Washington.
Peter, has there ever been a case of fake information changing the course of a war?
Many. I mean, war is often won by deception. So the Trojan War was won with an act of deception.
Taking us all the way back.
Take that as history, yeah. So I think, Sun Tzu and others insist on deception being an absolute prerequisite of winning a war, or maybe sometimes, weirdly, the decisive factor. So deception is part and parcel of war. If we're talking about kind of atrocity propaganda, historically we have many, many examples of that. But I think most spectacularly is World War One, where tales of or rumors of German atrocity propaganda were a major motivator of Britain and then especially America joining the war, when there's all these stories about Germans bayoneting nuns and pregnant mothers that emerge, partly spread by the British, which motivate Britain and America to join the war and cause much resentment afterwards. So that's really when we have the sort of real sort of panic around the impact of disinformation, fake news, propaganda, and war.
Well, Peter, what do you make of the misinformation that we're seeing circulating around the Iran war now?
So a lot of it is just to be honest, like with a lot of AI, I mean, it's really just it's an augmentation of what we've seen in social media and what we've seen historically, in the sense that we have all this AI generated imagery of shock and horror in Dubai, which isn't always true, which is a way to augment Iran's aura of strength and to spread panic in the Gulf. That's pretty common. I mean, before we had AI, people were doing that with rumors. The British in World War II spread rumors that they had a weapon that could set the channel on fire, which was spread among German troops so that they would be alarmed around the invasion of Britain. So that's pretty classic stuff, That really is war propaganda 101. I think what's fascinating now is the way it kind of borders on kind of cultural references, and sort of Iran making Lego videos about American war crimes. It's one of the cartoons that Iran made. It was a Lego video of the Americans hitting the girls' school in Tehran, because that clearly wasn't for an Iranian audience. That was almost telegraphing into an American audience that Iran can play the meme games, which I thought fascinating. But again, not that unusual. So the idea that you would use the enemy's idioms and language and memes to kind of almost crawl inside their language and unsettle it from inside is not particularly new. AI lets you do it faster. AI lets you do it at very low cost. AI lets you do it at scale. AI lets you test it iteratively in a way that was impossible before. So in that sense, AI is a game changer. I'm not saying it's not, but it's a game changer in terms of production. But in terms of strategies, it's just a technological upscale of very, very, very common strategies.
Can we drill down a little deeper on the strategy and incentive? Because prior to speaking with you, we were speaking with our colleague Thomas, who works with BBC Verify. And he mentioned that many of the AI videos we're seeing now appear to be privately created. And Thomas was explaining to us that people appear to be creating this content for financial incentives in some cases. They don't all necessarily have a political dog in this fight. And I'm curious how significant that is and how that compares to, I know you've done a lot of work on state-backed misinformation and propaganda. And to be clear, there are certainly nation states and countries that benefit from these AI videos. But what I thought was fascinating is he was saying some of the people creating this appear to be people who are just trying to make a buck.
But this is exactly the same thing we saw in 2016. Remember the Montenegrin troll farms? This was the first kind of wave of awareness and sort of panic around the possibilities of digital propaganda. And, these are all these kind of like online stories in support of Trump. And it turned out they were being produced by content farms in Montenegro. And all the journalists went down to Montenegro thinking they would find kind of Russian troll farms or MAGA troll farms. And there was a bit of that, but actually it was just a bunch of Montenegrin kids who worked out that they could make some money on this. And they were creating these kind of spam sites, these sort of slop sites with a mix of kind of like pills that make you strong, Trump is big and sexy, and advertising. And they were doing it because they saw this wave. They had zero interest in American politics. They knew very little about American politics. They just saw this wave building and they latched onto it. So in that sense, I guess with the democratization of content production, you're going to have people looking to make a buck on it.
Yeah, Peter, I mean, from what you're saying, this is nothing new. Disinformation has been a part of conflicts and wars since, all the way back to the Trojan War days. But nonetheless, as you say, the quantity of this stuff with AI just becomes that much greater, and the quality of those AI videos in future will become that much more convincing too. Do you think that that aspect of it could actually change the shape of conflicts in future?
I don't know about shaping the change of conflict. Conflict is changing in so many ways, but I mean, there's been a overall sense that conflicts have become even more about perception because we're in such an information-saturated society. I mean, taking the war in Ukraine, even when very little happens on the ground, the perception games around it can influence whether people think Russia is winning or Ukraine is winning, when really it's just slow attrition, and that can influence how negotiations go. The amount you can do in shifting perceptions, because the information environment is so saturated, is probably, dramatic. Yeah. But in terms of the kind of what does the quantity do, I think what the quantity does is it doesn't necessarily change the propaganda, it changes what we do about it. Because our way to battle propaganda was censorship, frankly. It was always one of the ways. But that's not something democratic societies do, but not something you really can do to any great effect in this information environment. We'll struggle to. And two, it's like pluralism, and you have real truth to balance the lies, and somehow it all kind of works out in some glorious and now seemingly utterly mythical marketplace of ideas. And the people are looking for the truth, and they'll get to it if you just provide it to them. And the BBC will balance out all the slop and lies.
We like to believe that.
Of course we will.
But the problem is that when you can make the slop and lies at scale at so little cost, that marketplace idea completely falls apart. And the ways that we have to fight propaganda pluralism, a belief that you can hold the powerful accountable, the truth, kind of a checks and balances of information, that has completely collapsed. And I don't think that's anything that we've really started to deal with. We have all these romantic ideas, and I don't think they're true anymore for this environment. And I don't think we're managing that very well.
That's it for the Global Story today. Thanks for tuning in. And if you enjoyed our show, I've got to mention that we here at the Global Story are also available as an audio podcast. You can find us on bbc.com or wherever you listen.